Hello, it is Success Story, Saturday, June 23rd, 2018. Steve Sipress here, coming to you from inside of my pool on this 105 or so degree day. This is the place to be, inside the pool. Speaking of which, today seems like a fitting day to tell the story about the ice king of the world, a guy by the name of Frederic Tudor, who invented the ice trade in 1806. Over 2 centuries ago, and he influenced the world not only in ways by his ice, but in other ways. I first heard of him when I was a student back in law school, because he had influence. His business dealings created landmark legal cases. But basically, the story goes, he lived up in Lynn, Massachusetts, and had a big lake in his backyard, and he decided in the winter of 1806 to slice up big chunks of, the ice covering the lake, slice it up into big chunks, put it on a boat, and take it on a 20-day voyage down south to the Caribbean to sell it in the Caribbean isle of Martinique. And unfortunately, lesson number one, that first season that he took the ice down there, it basically all melted before anyone could do anything with it, and it was a total failure and disaster. So the lesson number one is, he knew he had a good idea. Did he quit just because of a setback? Of course not. That's what 9-to-5ers do. They complain and blame everybody, but entrepreneurs understand that life is full of ups and downs, and we're testing an idea, and it doesn't always work perfectly the first time, so he learned his lesson. And the next year when he went back, he this time took it to Cuba, and in advance, he contracted with some local Cubans to build an ice house in advance of his arrival, and then he was off to the races. And so he invented an ingenious way of shipping the ice, where he packed it all with sawdust and whatever and put it below the water line so it stayed cool all the way down on the voyage, and then quickly sold it anyway. Long story short, this revolutionized life all around the world, because he eventually sold it all over Europe, Asia, South America, you name it, where people would go through in those days. I know it's hard to believe now in the world of refrigeration and ice is everywhere, that basically food was extremely perishable. And that's about it. So you know how you see signs now when you go to a restaurant or a supermarket that a certain food is in season? Well, before Frederic Tudor, that was it. It was in season, and then it didn't exist. There was no such thing as frozen foods or, out of season foods. Didn't exist. Another thing he did, he revolutionized the bar industry, because he made ice so plentiful and so cheap in the U.S. that he basically cornered the market with what is near and dear to my heart as the middle O of the WOW strategy, is your irresistible offer. He had an irresistible offer. He offered bar owners free ice for a year. Now, he did that strategically and didn't offer it to all of them. He'd offer it to like one in each area. And that bar, which was now became known to have cold drinks and drinks that could have ice in them, and being the only bar in town that had that, the next season when Tudor offered ice, all the other bar owners who wanted to compete now had to buy ice from him. So that one free year of ice was the irresistible offer. And ironically, as I talk about being the tip of the iceberg thinking, he realized that tip of the iceberg, that initial order, he'd give it away free, and then below the surface where 90% of the iceberg is, again, it's ironic that this is iceberg, no relation to the story here, just the concept that 90% of an iceberg is hidden below the water. That's where 90% of your profits are, on future sales and referral sales and viral sales, like in this case. So he took a hit at the tip of the iceberg and lost money, of course, on the first free year to certain bar owners, but then he reaped the rewards for years later. And you can, obviously, I don't have to tell you all the ways that having foods no longer perishable changed entire industries, including the city I lived in for over 15 years in Chicago, where they have that whole meatpacking industry. But until ice came along, that whole industry kind of closed up shop in the summer when it was too hot and meat was perishable and there was no way to keep it. And Chicago would have not been anywhere near the city it was without Frederic Tudor and his ingenious devising entrepreneurial invention of a way to ship ice and revolutionize the way people live. Now, the way I heard about him in law school was a couple of cases. One was a patent case, that there was some kind of patent lawsuit over his ice shipping method or ice keeping method or something along that, is still studied today and is one of the basics of patent law, is a case derived from a Frederic Tudor ice escapade. And another one, I'm trying to remember, oh yeah, another one was this property rights thing where all the other townspeople that lived on that lake in Lynn realized that, hey, in my backyard, I got lots of money here if I just get out there and harvest the ice and start selling it. And this led to too much competition, which damaged the whole industry and threatened to destroy it if Tudor wasn't smart enough to fix it, because what happened was people were encouraged to get out there and start cutting up the ice and selling it way before it had time to mature into deep enough, strong enough, thick enough blocks of ice that it could survive the voyage. And so the whole industry was in peril until Tudor came up with a way to negotiate with all the townspeople, anybody living on the lake. He made a deal, they all worked together, and that is still studied throughout business schools and law schools and just smart entrepreneurs everywhere, a way of cooperation instead of competition, something I always talk about. So we owe all that to Frederic Tudor, 23-year-old kid, entrepreneur, came up with an idea in 1806 that is still being felt all over the world. And one thing he did is still, being felt in the fact that Europe, they love to drink warm drinks, warm beer. They don't have the penchant for cold drinks and cold beer like we have in the U.S. because there was a lot more ice sold from Massachusetts, and Tudor started it, but then others. Massachusetts became known as the ice capital of the world, and everyone was chopping up ice. And so, sure, some of it reached Europe, but not nearly as much as reached all over the U.S., and so still to this day, the U.S., we have a penchant for cold drinks, where the rest of the world is still loving their warm drinks. That all dates back also to the entrepreneur that I'm thinking of today, as it's over 100 degrees, and I'm enjoying a day with my beautiful wife Michelle here in our pool in sunny, way too sunny and hot Arizona today, thinking about ice, enjoying some ice, having a drink with ice, and we we owe all of that, that's how you say it, to the entrepreneur success story of the day, one Frederic Tudor. Look it up. You'll learn a lot of lessons, more than I just covered here. And I see a whole bunch of people are here. Beth is here, and F.A. is here, and I can't scroll up and see a whole bunch of other people. Casey's here, and Joe, and Mike, and I can feel the phone getting hot. Yesterday it crapped out on me and overheated in the middle of my video, or towards the end of the video, so today I'm going to end it here. And that's one reason I'm attempting to get into a little shady area here, where the phone might not overheat as quickly, and it hasn't, and I've made it through today's video. How about that? I will be checking back tomorrow on Sunday Fun Day, where my beautiful wife Michelle are going to be heading to an IMAX theater to see the new Jurassic Park movie. So we're going to enjoy some throwback Sunday of dinosaurs chasing people around in an air-conditioned, cool movie theater. Hope you're enjoying your weekend as well, and if you're anywhere near as hot as